This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. The following CareLab podcast does not provide health or medical advice. All content is provided for information purposes only. Listeners are encouraged to speak with their healthcare provider for specific healthcare advice and are wholly responsible for the outcome of implementing any tips or information presented.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CareLab.
Or afternoon or evening or anytime you're listening. We're
Sure.
glad you are here. I'm also really glad that we have some really awesome guests today. And I'm so excited to introduce Deb and Emily. They are both caregivers for family members who are living with dementia. And after they pass, they decided to create an activity that they wish they actually had when they were caring for their family members. So it's called Hodie, and it's a photo-based card game with no rules, which is really important, and designed specifically for people who are living with dementia and those who love and care for them. They live in Vermont, and they both have other full-time jobs, but Hodie is their passion and has brought them so much joy, and me as well. So you're going to get a chance to hear all about them, but I'm super glad to have them on. I'm always very inspired to have people who see a problem and try to find a way to solve it, and they've been in the problem themselves. And so that's how we got connected, because another OT who specializes in dementia care uses the Hodie cards all the time. So there's an activity to do that doesn't have the stress of trying to follow some rules or have some kind of form, but there's still a thing to hold on to and to do. And so I'm so glad to have you both on the show. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is really exciting. This actually, what y'all do at Hodie is something that's very close to my heart as someone who has worked extensively with people who have dementia and someone who had a grandmother who had Alzheimer's. I'm really, really excited to have you all and talk about your journeys in this. But first, we have to start with our icebreaker question. And I think that this question is super relevant to you both here today. Are you ready for it? Okay, as I told you before, you have to answer first. You get no breathing room.
I know,
no breathing room here on
them
CareLab.
saying yes, but shaking their heads no. So,
Bag of emotions.
Okay, so here's the question. Are you a rule follower or a rule breaker?
Ooh, nice.
It's a good one, right?
We have talked about this. This has come up before. I will start with that answer because the first thing that popped into my head is probably 18 or 20 years ago, I got pulled over on my way home from work by a very nice police officer. I still remember his name, and he pulled me over because he said I did not do a complete stop at a stop sign. This is 18 years ago, and now every single stop sign I come to, I actually stop, take my hands off the wheel, and count to 3.
Wow.
And then go. So I am, in some parts of my life, I don't think I'm a rule follower, in my creative pursuits, but in day-to-day life, I was so upset by that. I wrote him this long letter saying, I know I stopped because I'm a rule follower.
That
it's pathetic,
is,
I know.
I should drive in your city. I'll be a little bit safer.
We only have 3 stop signs on my entire drive. So, Deb?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, Emily. And I'm thinking of a story somewhat kind of similar where it was Bed Bath & Beyond. Back in the day, we had a Bed Bath & Beyond store here, and I was buying a wedding present for a cousin, and it was a set of place settings. And when I was walking out of the store, I realized they had not charged me for one of the place settings out of the 4 I bought. I bought 4. I walked out with 4. I paid for 3. I happened to look at the receipt, and it was a winter day and it was cold and miserable. And I was at my car, and I turned around and went back in the store and insisted on paying for the last place setting instead of walking away and ignoring it, pretending I never looked at the receipt. And I've had some other instances like that. So I feel like I'm a
but you know what? That's also just like ethical, right? Like you wanted to.
I agree.
Yeah, that's just like good ethical behavior. Like we all hope that that's like what we would choose and what our kids would choose. So, good job. Way to be a good person.
Fair enough.
Deb is a good person.
I try.
Yeah.
I try.
Deb, maybe you should get Employee of the Month.
I'll take it.
All right, Randy, what about you?
Okay.
Oh, Amelia, do you think I'm a rule follower or a rule breaker?
I think that you and I are going to be pretty similar on this, where
it's interesting because I think it's like, I don't know. I don't think I have one way to be, I guess, because in so many ways, I follow the rule of ask for forgiveness and not for permission. Like this is like a life motto. So I'm breaking rules all the time. But on the other hand, in like structured situations, I'm maybe pushing the rules to their limit, but I do follow the rules, like I was a very good student and I did all the things and try to make sure everybody was pleased with me. And so, I don't know. I think it's both, but maybe the trigger point is if the rules if the rules feel unfair, or they don't work well for a lot of people, and I see a way to solve a problem in that, then I'm going to try to push at that.
Yeah. I feel like same for me. I think there are some rules that I follow very, very closely, and ways that I've been told like, wow, you're really like, you're overdoing this here. But, if it's like a legal rule or something that I consider to be like an ethical issue or those kinds of things that are like or a safety issue or something like that is a rule that I'm going to follow, and I'm always going to follow it to the letter. On the other hand, if it's more like, if I'm like, well, this rule is dumb, then I may not be super inclined to follow that rule. Like, I'm not going to do anything that's going to put myself or anyone else like in jeopardy from like a health perspective or safety perspective or like legal perspective or anything like that. But our world is made up of many, many rules, and lots of them are stupid. And so I don't necessarily feel, I would rather find a better way to solve the problem that rule was put in place for.
Yeah.
Than just blindly follow whatever that rule says the path forward is. So I think I very much live by, a lot of the time, same as you. I would rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission, if I can get away with it. But depends on the situation.
And as a podcast full of entrepreneurs here, I'd argue to say that when you start a new thing, you are also, not necessarily following the rules. You could have just did what was already happening, but you saw a problem and tried to solve it.
Well, and that's funny because with the way Deb and I have gone about this whole business thing, we know nothing about business. We know nothing about starting a business, running a business. And so we were breaking rules all the time, just unintentionally, because we didn't know them, and nothing like big and illegal or unethical, but just not knowing like what we were supposed to do next. So we would just try stuff and see what happens, and then Google it and realize, oh, we didn't actually follow what we were supposed to do there.
Such as the learning and the entrepreneurial journey, I think, for so many of us who don't necessarily get to this path through like a traditional way through business school or something like that. I do want to segue the conversation here a little bit, because I want to make sure that we are like focusing in on your stories and also the value of what y'all have come up with based on your own personal experiences. But let's kind of start at the beginning. Would each of you mind sharing, Emily and Deb, what were your caregiving experiences? Can you share a little bit about that journey with us?
Yeah, I can go first. My father-in-law had Alzheimer's. So he was living actually in Florida when he was first diagnosed with an early onset Alzheimer's, more or less, and weren't as close to him as we became eventually. But my husband, he has two sons, but one's in London. And then my husband's here in Vermont. So, and we have a lot of extended family in the South, and some of them, his older brother moved him up to South Carolina at one point when he couldn't be on his own anymore. And then for the last 4 to 5 years of his life, he was moved up to Vermont and was with us in Vermont. And so we were able to really get to know him again and take care of him. And we were not caregivers 24/7. He wasn't in the home with us. He was in an assisted living facility, but we were more or less the only family geographically nearby that was regularly managing everything for him and taking care of him, visiting him, taking him out. So that was the last 4 or 5 years of his life. And he was up here in Vermont where we were caring for him.
My father had Lewy body dementia. So, and that was something that for probably the last 8 years of his life he lived with. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease before that. He stayed at home the entire time. I have a stepmother who was his primary carer, and she gave up everything to keep him in the home. So she was 10 years younger than he was, and gave up her career, most of her friends, everything she liked to do in order to be able to keep him home and care for him full time. I live about 30 minutes away from their house, from her house now. And so I was the secondary caregiver, I guess. So the one who was always on call, came in a couple times a week to relieve Allegra for large chunks of time. And it was actually, I've always been close to my father, but the time that I spent with him while he had dementia, particularly in the last 5 years of his life, I would never have spent that much time with him if he were healthy. I mean, I know that's ridiculous, but when I think a family member is healthy, you take them for granted, right? They're always going to be there. So you cancel things, you call every once in a while. But because we sort of had this, forced relationship, I got to spend a lot more time with him than I think I would have. And we were able to form a new relationship that obviously kept changing as his disease progressed and changed.
Hey there, it's Amelia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the CareLab team. And here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
2 questions at the same time that you hopefully can answer. One, how did you guys meet? And then as in your relationship, there's so many problems in being a caregiver for somebody who has dementia. What was it about activity that brought you to say, look, we should develop something for this?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to play cards with my dad all the time. That was our thing ever since I was a little kid. And when after he was diagnosed with dementia, we continued to play cards. And it was something that really right up until the very end of his life we could do together, though what it meant to play cards had to change significantly. But there was an element of that tactile, he always remembered holding cards in his hand and loved that. So whatever game we were playing with those. So that activity was one that sort of inspired, I think, us with our card game. But Deb and I had known each other, and jump in here, Deb, if I get this wrong. We've known each other for, 30 years, but kind of we had the same friends, but we weren't friends. So we would end up at all the same parties or weddings, and we'd always be there. But and I think I was always drawn to Deb because of her humor, really. We have a very similar sense of humor at these things. But then we started to realize we had things in common. And I think that led to, it was after both of your father-in-law and my father had died, and we'd been getting a little bit closer. And then we just were talking about activities, I think, right? Were we talking about what we wish we had?
Yeah. You're doing pretty well. Not bad.
Thanks. Yeah. Fell apart a little bit there at the end.
Yeah. So we were sort of acquaintances who really respected and liked each other and similar senses of humor, and just always enjoyed seeing each other when we'd come across each other, but didn't only interacted. Yeah. Mostly when we were at other events we happened to both be invited to. But the big thing I remember, Em, is going to the Parkinson's conference. So Emily's father had Parkinson's, and my husband was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's in 2018. So when that happened, I asked if she wanted to go to a conference in Ottawa for the Davis Finney Foundation. So it's for carers, it's for patients, it's for healthcare providers. So we drove there, and she stopped at every stop sign I noticed and waited.
You're like, what are you doing?
Did you set each other up for that in the beginning? I mean, that was too perfectly timed.
I was thinking that as soon as you told that story, though. I was like,
a rat.
So I think so we had, a weekend together in Ottawa 24/7. And it was sort of, I think that's where we really connected as our own friends. And we would refer to each other as our new old friend, my new old friend, Emily. So then, in March of 2022, after my father-in-law and your father passed, I remember getting a call from you and saying, I have this idea, like, don't you think there's there's just not enough things to do. There's not enough tools in the toolkit for people that have loved ones with dementia. And, maybe there's something we can do about it. And I'm thinking we're just going to have some coffee and have a nice chat, and it'd be good to catch up. I think you had just been in New York for something. I'm like, I'll hear about our trip in New York City, and it'll be great. And by the time we left that coffee date, we had ordered a prototype set of cards.
That's fast.
And then, she doesn't mess around.
I don't. When I've decided on something, I don't want to think about it anymore. I'm like, let's just do it. Let's get the first step done, see what happens.
Yeah. And the card playing with your dad clearly was a huge piece of it. And then another piece of the fact that photo-based, my father-in-law, the first couple of years, we were able to take him out all the time from the facility. But as his as Alzheimer's progressed, it was just more difficult, and it really wasn't possible. It wasn't safe. So we would have to spend time with him in the facility, and we were just out of things to do. Like, we cannot find ways to engage with him. We don't want to watch another Golden Girls episode, as lovely as they are.
Blanche.
And so we're, I mean, come on. So what one thing we started doing was bringing photo albums in, and they were our family photo albums. And he did not necessarily remember who was in the photos. He didn't remember the stories of the photos. He wasn't getting the names right, but he was so engaged in looking through that photo album. It really brought out something in him, and we would just have conversations about the photos and what he was seeing, and he was making up stories, and he was just it just became this huge sort of moment of brightness in what was often like a really difficult time. So we really started talking about what we wanted to do. It'd be something that was really visually attractive, that was, visually stimulating to people as well. So sort of that's where the photograph piece kind of came in, as well as the card piece with your father and the playing cards and the rules, knowing that we needed to keep it flexible, having no rules, but making it, something that would not depend on memory, because clearly that's a challenge. So make it your own game. Meet them where they are.
There are like 3 things that y'all have honed in on here that I think resonate so deeply, like with me personally as a person who had a loved one with dementia, but also like as a clinician and as someone who teaches about dementia care regularly. And that is, first, in both of your stories, you both independently brought up the fact that even though your loved one had dementia, it actually presented an opportunity for you to rekindle and re-explore and connection and relationship with that person, that it actually created that opportunity for you. And I think that is an incredibly powerful thing to think about. The second thing is that you also honed in on the fact that you have to have something to do. People with dementia don't want to sit around and be bored and do nothing. They're still human beings. They want to participate. They want to be active. And so, like, how can we do that? And then the third thing, which just like so hits the nail on the head in terms of providing a great experience for everyone, is not requiring anything or having expectations of the person that you are trying to engage with. Not asking them to remember, or asking them to tell a story or correct things or remember rules or anything like that, but just to purely be there in that moment and engage with them. And that's what I think is so powerful and really like clever about what y'all have done with the game, is you've made it really easy for other people, where for many people that is not none of those things are natural to do in that caregiving relationship, but you've created this tool that actually makes that easier for people to do. Would you talk a little bit more about how the game actually works?
Yeah. So we have, I would say the calling it a game, and we do call it a game. We say a game without rules, I think is, it's more of an activity that, I think the flexibility. So when we designed what the cards were going to look like and the type of cards we were going to have, we wanted to ensure that it was really versatile, right? So we have 2 of every photograph so that you can do some sort of matching activity with it, but we didn't want to limit it to matching. We thought about sorting and organizing. So when my father and I, at times when we would be playing with a regular deck of cards, sometimes the game we would play, we would always call it gin rummy because that was our thing. But sometimes it was sorting the red cards and the black cards. Sometimes he would be able to sort face cards. So sorting was something we wanted to do. So when we chose photographs, we had to be really intentional about choosing photographs that could be sorted in different ways. So for instance, in our bird set, we made sure we had different colors of birds or different colors on birds so that it could be sorted by color. But we also made sure we had a set of birds that are flying, birds that are perched, birds that are in the water. And then we have a kind of a little bit more sophisticated level of, birds of prey, songbirds. So depending on really somebody's knowledge about birds, someone's experience, and sort of where they are with their dementia that day, they can sort and organize in a lot of different ways, from simple to more complex. Deb, did I miss, what other kind of activities did we suggest?
Yeah, and I mean, other thing, it can really, we have suggested activities in each card set. So again, we say there's no rules, but we want to give some people some places to start with. And Emily's mentioning some of those. And then you can do other things. It can be like an I Spy. What do you see in the card? Tell me about the card. A sort of like, observe and wonder. Like, tell me what you're seeing and tell a story about it. So encouraging that storytelling as well. And we pick themes. So Emily mentioned the bird theme. So each card set has a theme. So we have car show and birds. And we're trying to pick a theme that would appeal to, although dementia can certainly impact people of any age, the vast majority are going to be older adults. And so we're picking, themes that would be appealing to that demographic. So starting with the birds and then adding the cars. There's a little nod to Emily and her father and the car show theme as well, because that was a passion that they shared. So that makes it even more personal, which is great. And I know my father-in-law never a birder in his life. But when he was in the last facility he was in, we put a bird feeder out front outside the window, and he was obsessed with watching the birds come in and feed, and he would try to name them and, you know, make up stories about them. So that was always very meaningful to me as well.
Another thing that was important to us in designing the cards is that they wouldn't be language based, so that would not be a limitation. And so that was important for a lot of reasons, whether we didn't want something that was based in the English language that would limit, cross-cultural communication as well. Between a caregiver and the person that they're caring for. And then also language can really get in the way. That was something I know that was really frustrating for my father when he, would struggle with the words on a page and so we removed all language from the front of the cards, tried to keep the photos really simple and crisp as well. So that was something that was important to us. Just so visually, it's not confusing, which can get really frustrating.
Are you sure you're not OTs? Because this is just like, really, really just so well thought out and designed. Sorry, Brandy, go ahead.
We have all these OT speak words that describe what you're saying, but you created a system in which it's accessible to generally everybody, and you've removed the barriers, which makes it so much easier to engage. And I think there's two things. Amelia brought out the things that y'all have said and highlighted. I want to bring out two things that you're not saying that I think are really important. And so the first one is that this is an activity that has a physical thing. In theory, you could pull up some pictures of birds on a phone and just show it to them and say, tell me a story about this. What do you think about this? You could do that. But the importance of being able to hold something in your hand, because there's such need and desire at some points in the dementia process. They want to put your hands on something and do something, right? Our bodies are made to move. And even when you get to a point where you're not cognitively aware of the fact that you want to do a thing, you're still trying to do a thing. And so this puts something in your hand so you can do something productive and not open locks and pour things out that don't need to pour it out, or whatever that be, maladaptive.
Go through your roommate's jewelry box, things like that.
Yes, and take out stuff. Yeah. Exactly. So I think that's such a
take your bra off
point too.
And run down the hallway.
Yes, exactly.
And that was one of the things. So we did prototype testing with area facilities and agencies on aging. So we just started with it in April. We started in March of 2022. In April, we just started driving around physically to facilities and dropping off cards with a feedback form for the activities directors. And so we went through a few iterations. There were a few different prototypes, but that's some of the feedback they gave us really helped in terms of the tactile nature of the cards, certainly having something physical, but having a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not glossy. It's not, it's
having a little
texture to it. Thank you, Emily. And that they were rounded corners. So they're not sharp. So they're not, and they're durable. So they can, I have some cards right here. But so they're very durable, and they're also not a traditional playing card size. So they're square. They're 4x4 square, which they were easier for people to handle. The box is really sturdy. It's a thick box. It's sturdy. It can be, and it's also, you can take it off and put it on. It's easy to maneuver, and you can throw it in your pocket. You can throw it in a nightstand. It's easy to carry around. So just anything we're thinking of, when we would go visit, what worked for us and what works for other folks when we're talking to the activities directors and putting them in the hands of our friends and family tested them. We had friends, unfortunately, Emilia, you touched on this, that you had a family member with dementia. We don't meet anybody who doesn't have a family member who's impacted by dementia. Unfortunately, there's a never-ending audience for this, which is really sad, but it's the truth. And so that's one thing that's been amazing is every show we go to, or every, we've sold at local markets, and everyone we talk to, the stories that come out of their loved ones living with dementia, it's just endless. And Emily just wrote a great blog about it actually on our website. Because when we're at a holiday market, And, someone selling doll clothes next to us, it's great. But the stories and the people that come to us and are like crying in our booth because they're just telling us their stories and they're just letting it all out. And connecting with us on that level. It's incredible. It's really amazing.
So true. So true. CareLab listener, I have a question for you. If someone you love needed a caregiver, what qualities would you want that caregiver to have? You probably want them to be reliable, trustworthy, kind, maybe just a generally dependable and good person, right? Second question, would you also want them to be trained? I'm gonna guess the answer is a definite yes. Okay, third and final question for you. Do you think it matters who gives that training? Like, is it cool if it's just in your body, or would you want that person to be qualified expert? Assuming you do, in fact, love this person who needs a caregiver, you probably want the expert, right? Well, that's what Higher Standards Caregiver Training does. Higher Standards Caregiver Training provides 100% occupational therapist-led training for caregivers. Caregivers get taught everything from gold standard foundational skills for transfers and daily living tasks, all the way up to how to deal with specific diseases and injuries. And most importantly, they are taught all of these things in a way that is practical and enhances the participation of the person who needs the care. And it actually protects the safety of everybody involved. Why? Because everyone deserves a higher standard. For a course for individuals, or learning about training for care for organizations, find that information at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com. Like my grandmother had dementia and she lived with us. My mom was the primary caregiver when I was like a teenager / college age. And so watching her provide care to my grandmother and see that transition completely impacted, one, my life, but also like my career choice, And so, you're right. There's nobody that I know that can't point to somebody in their life who has dementia. Yeah. And that's why I think the other thing that you're not saying that I think is really important is that both of you, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, kind of try to downplay your caregiving role because you weren't caring for your person in your own house. And you're intentional to say they're at the assisted living facility, they're here at their own house, but I came and did stuff. Right? And I think that's super important because it brings out a couple of things. One, it can be really hard if you are the primary caregiver to even think about doing stuff because you're doing so many other things every day and you're managing this all the time. And that's why it's so important to have more people on the team who are providing care in other ways, right? Not only so that somebody can leave and go do something else, but also so that other things can be happening. And like y'all both were in charge of having fun and like having activity and engaging. So they're not just sitting there like bumps on a log, right? And like that was a super important part of their lives. And then you also mentioned how it was an important part of your life too. And so I just wanted to like elevate that because I think sometimes people downplay how important additional roles are in the care of somebody else.
Yeah, and if we had more people playing additional roles, how much easier and more enriched would everyone's life be?
Right. And I appreciate all of what you're saying. It's absolutely true. And I was just thinking, Emily, when you've talked about how visitors would stop coming, your dad's friends would stop visiting because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to interact with him. And so that was a big part of this too, is like, what can, even though, we're caregivers as well, or carers, what can we help other people that are coming? Will it encourage other people to come if we can provide them something to do? And I've heard that from family members when we first started this is, I have an uncle who had a friend who was diagnosed with dementia and he was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with them. Like I go over there and we can't really have the conversations we used to have. And I was like, oh, well, I have something for you. And he started going over with the cards and it was great. And also you're talking about, I think, Brandy, you touched on people just being able to touch the cards and use them and play with them. And we've heard from some family members who have given the cards to their loved ones who, it was one woman that she said the gentleman told us it was his wife who had Alzheimer's. It was the first time in, I don't know how long, a year, that she was able to just sit at the table without him having to kind of hover and help her and walk her through something. And she was just touching the cards and stacking them and matching them and placing them and just just working with them. And he had a break. He got a break from respite, which is also incredibly important, as we all know, to have that break.
So I think that honestly, we could go on, and I could get really nerdy talking about all of the details of why what y'all have created is so valuable and fantastic. But I think that what listeners might like better is to find out where they can actually get the game. So can you tell us where can people find this?
Well, first on Ask Sammy.
Ask Sammy. You know it.
Wonderful.
Well done, Emily.
Resource. Thank you. And then direct through our website as well. So we do have both sets there, as well as we do sell T-shirts. I don't know if you can see. They say "Play Without Rules" ODA, and the proceeds for the T-shirts go to the peer-to-peer caregiving, which is a new kind of pilot program through the University of Vermont Deb, help me out here.
PBM Memory Center. Yeah,
PBM Memory Center
program.
Yeah, and what they do is they pair up experienced dementia caregivers with new dementia caregivers.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They do a mentorship program. So that has started within the last couple of years. So anyway, the proceeds for our T-shirts go to that organization. It's really an amazing. You spoke a moment ago about the importance of, for people who are primary caregivers, having that secondary and even tertiary group around them that can support. And I think that's what this group really does, is to help give that support to that primary carer. And then local, we have, there's a handful of local bookstores. So if you're in the Vermont area, Phoenix Books or Flying Pigs,
Yankee Bookshop. I think we're in about 12 different retail outlets around the country. Mm-hmm. So outside of Vermont, which was really exciting. We've noticed what we've heard. They're generally toy stores or bookshops. Mm-hmm. And the toy store angle is interesting because what we had heard from the owners of the stores is that they don't have enough products aimed at other populations outside of kids in terms of traditional and games and activities. So they were very excited to see something that was aimed at a different population, and so that was really exciting. So we're also in a couple hospital gift shops. So that's another area we've taken a look at and reached out to, and then we do have some online presence beyond our website. We have Amazon, we have Mighty, which is a local Burlington, Vermont area website that's sort of local Amazon. So they're a startup. It's really exciting to be part of that. And then we're on the SNS Worldwide site as well. And so, which is great because they're actually dedicated. They have a whole section dedicated to activities directors for assisted living and memory care facilities. So specific dementia related products.
But Ask Sammy is the best place to go to get them.
You're doing great.
How am I doing?
Appreciate it so much.
Randy wants you on.
I get some extra.
Every episode. Come on, every episode, please.
What a rule follower.
Oh my gosh. Well, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to be here, and also just like the effort that you took to create something that's so useful to so many people. And thank you for sharing your story with everybody, and where they can find HODA cards. And if they have questions or want to connect with you directly, what's the best way they can connect?
Yeah, we have through our website. Clearly, we have a contact us page, and then we have an email. People, we love getting emails. Is it Emerly? Emerly Cards. Emerly. EMERLY cards @gmail.com. So that's a combination of Emerson and Emily that took us about 4 seconds to come up with. But it's one of my favorite things. It's also the name of our actual LLC. So it's
Beautiful.
a company name.
If you guys have made it to the end of this episode, we appreciate you. Please make sure that you are downloading our episode, share it with a friend, subscribing on wherever place that you are watching or listening to this on. That way you can know when our next episode comes out, which will be next Friday. So thanks, and that's it. Bye.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
This is the Whole Care Network. helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.